You sound okay? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Very good, excellent. So my name is Jacob. I'm a Danish construction lawyer with about 20 years of experience in both EPC contracting in the power plant industry, and currently I work for a company called Femern, which is the owner entity on the Femern project. Some of you may have heard about. My story comes from my background working for an EPC contractor, building power plants, especially in Africa. In one project in Africa, this was in the western part of the continent, we built a power plant of 120 megawatts. This was a dual-fueled four-stroke engine power plant for a small African country. This was an EPC plus F type arrangement where we, as the EPC contractor, came up with the financial model. Essentially, this was a non-recourse type finance model. So the elements in that model were, first of all, securing external financing through loans from a club of financiers. This was a club consisting of both development banks, commercial banks, and also pension funds. It had all the features that we've heard about, especially in the first presentation from Ms. Liu. So I won't add too much there, other than saying that step-in rights, direct agreement, collateral warranties played a major role in the setup. PCGs issued by the parent entity of the EPC contractor, along with performance bonds, played a pivotal role as well. And finally, credit guarantee from the Danish Export Credit Foundation called IFU also played a pivotal role. There was a letter of credit issued by the lenders, or the club rather, and the EPC contract was then financed through drawdowns on this letter of credit. So it had all the elements that we've heard about. I would add perhaps that the deferral was commonly seen in this project and also other projects. Typically, we were looking at a 30% upfront payment against an advance payment bond or several advance payment bonds. Then you would have about 55 to 60% of the contract price spread over a number of milestones. And finally, there would be a retention of between 10 and 15% on successful completion of the performance tests at the end. But really the more hidden, if you would, part of the EPC price was under the O&M contract, the operation and maintenance contract, which was, and in all the projects I worked on, combined with the EPC project. So essentially, the EPC contractor would build and then operate the power plant until the end of its lifetime under the O&M contract. And looking back at these projects, I did about 15 of them during my tenure with the company. More or less, the power plant was built at cost or with a small loss. I'll come back to why that occurred. And then we would seek to gain the deficit and basically make the profit and secure the overhead under the O&M agreement. And that, you could say, was perhaps not sort of outspokenly planned, but nonetheless, that was what happened. So the O&M plays a pivotal role in this financial type model. Looking at the risks in general in non-recourse finance, but especially when building something in a developing country, well, first of all, you have the risk that the power plant or the power purchase agreement will not function as you plan. So you see the main source of revenue, obviously the only source of revenue into this system, comes from the power purchase agreement. The problem in some of these countries where we built was that the grid wasn't being operated optimally. There was power theft problems, and that is a big problem in a lot of African countries, that consumers simply steal power from the grid without paying. So you have a loss of revenue coming from these leakages. Secondly, you have suboptimal grid operations. Simply the grid capacity is sometimes a problem. You have catastrophic failures where transformer stations catch fire, and that will disrupt the revenue stream under the power purchase agreement that is used to fund or pay back rather the lenders, the O&M, the fuel for the power plant, and ultimately, I should mention that in a lot of these projects, the EPC contractor was compelled as a precondition for entering into the project to invest up to 15, sometimes even more, but typically 15 or 10 to 15% equity. So the EPC contractor, would also be the owner of the power plant, at least for a portion. So the grid and the PPA would present a risk. The second risk, which we've seen in especially the renewable segment under solar or photovoltaic power plant projects for example, in Spain in recent years, is that if these projects are subsidized by the host state, sometimes there's a change in the political sphere, resulting in basically the subsidies being cut, which totally tanks the financial model and leads to claims in a lot of these cases. Also in Portugal, we've seen examples of this, where simply the price of energy will be drastically diminished due to the fact that the state all of a sudden decides not to subsidize the project. Then finally, I'll point to expropriation. In the old days, we saw that as a problem, and you could come in, build something, and then the state would all of a sudden just expropriate you and kick you out of the country. So these are the three risks I'll point to. I'll just mention some ideas maybe for the debate. Is the project covered by a bilateral investment treaty? Does the host state have receivables, for example, under loan agreements with the World Bank that can be attached in case this comes to a dispute? And on the enforcement level, you end up with an award in your favor as an EPC contractor or as a lender. Can you then successfully enforce against assets outside the state? Political risk insurance is another topic which I find interesting. Should that be considered? Looking at the geopolitical risks, and there may be other topics. But I think that was my 8 minutes, so I'll stop with that and leave the